Carly Savjo, a journalism grad student, and I am from Tonopah, Nevada. I did not go to journalism school fully committed to the idea of being a journalist. What I wanted was to be a writer and to somehow make people's lives better. That's why, the fall before my high school graduation, I declared journalism as my major on my application to the University of Nevada, Reno. The night I applied was a typical school night. I'd gone for an evening run around the dirt trails behind my house. The trails were made by ATVs and ran parallel to the highway going out of town before twisting to the solidified silt from the Belmont mine, which looks like yellow clay running for miles past the town limits. Rusted metal coils littered the concrete levels of what used to be the huge mining operation which led to where the original mine had been, now covered with a large slab of concrete. In 1911, the Tonopah Daily Bonanza, which later became the Tonopah Times Bonanza, covered the story of 17 miners who died in the mines below the large slab of concrete, from toxic gases released from a fire that had broken out within the mine. Big Bill Murphy managed to rescue a number of miners before collapsing from the gases himself. There's a statue outside the post office of him now. The museum has photographs of the February funeral march downtown, with tiny figures dressed in black, carrying massive coffins across the stark white snow. The mine, albeit very significant and still very massive, is falling apart. The concrete levels are eaten away by sagebrush roots in the summer and deep snows in the winter. After my run, I eat dinner with my mom, do homework, and finish my application. It is time for bed. While my parents had gotten newspapers while I was growing up, at that time I didn't know the importance journalism has in a community. Over the past 5 years, I have learned about stories that change society, journalism's mission to hold those in power accountable, and its contribution to hold communities and democracies together. With all of its faults, journalism is important. The Tonopah Times had also told stories about me, my family, my friends. They reported on when I was Student of the Month and when I graduated high school. Now, many of those stories are going untold. When a community lacks regular reporting, who will tell the stories of its people?
The success of a community is really like a three-legged stool. And in this case, the three legs of the stool are communications, healthcare, and education. And if one of those legs fails, then the community starts to fail. And communications is very important. It's not just to let people know about health-related or items of significance in the community to keep them safe, but it's also to let them know what's going on in their community, to keep them engaged with their community, and to let them know that they're part of something bigger. Right now, all three legs in Tonopah are wobbly, and part of it certainly is because we cannot meet some of the social expectations of younger people.
The Tonopah Bonanza was established in 1901, 10 years after Jim Butler founded the town. The Tonopah Bonanza had a long run as a daily, then weekly paper. After a series of owners and mergers, it was bought in 2015 by the family of Las Vegas Sands Corporation Chairman and CEO Sheldon Adelson. The last reporter in Tonopah, who worked for the Pahrump Valley Times, left Tonopah in 2017. When he left, the reporter's job was never filled. The Pahrump Valley Times, 160 miles away, now publishes the Tonopah Times Bonanza from Pahrump. After my interview with Joni, who has been greatly involved with local government in Tonopah, I thought a lot about what she said about meeting the expectations of younger people. In many ways, I am contributing to the problem I am trying to bring light to. Several months after I applied to UNR, I moved to Reno and still live there. I don't have much of a plan to ever return to live in Tonopah again. However, I know the problem is not just the younger generation leaving. Newspaper circulation has been declining since the 1990s. We learned about this decline the very first journalism class I took in college. The news seemed grim at first, but as I continued my education, the death of news started to seem more like the transition of news. Business models based on advertising revenue were being replaced by nonprofits, bloggers, and online news organizations. People increasingly turned to social media directly to get their information. However, for towns like Tonopah, towns that cover most of Nevada, these don't have nonprofit news organizations. They don't have a local reporter at all anymore. The Pahrump Valley Times does what they can to cover news, but their staff of 4 reporters works overtime just to cover the stories in Pahrump and Nye County. The Tonopah Town Board meetings aren't covered, neither are the school board meetings, and there are times when Tonopah citizens say there is so little local news in their paper, it's not worth reading anymore.
So I used to deliver papers when I was a little boy, and we used to race down to the newspaper office when I was I remember 4th and 5th grade, and everyone would stand in line and we would sell the papers for 25 cents, and you wanted to be first in line so you could sell the most. And it used to be fun because everything was local, and as a little kid I never read it, but as I got older I started reading the papers and everything was local news. In order to get local news now, you have to write your own story and send it off to Pahrump. And some weeks there are local stories, and other weeks it looks like the USA Today newspaper. And you're getting actual national news stories in the Tonopah paper, which takes the allure of your local newspaper away because you want to read about what Mrs. Johnson did when she was having a pageant, or local sports. And eventually, if people don't know about something, it slowly starts going away. You only have events if you have people at events, and people don't go to events if they don't know they're happening. And so, there's lots of forms of media, and now everything's, most people are online doing stuff, but there are a lot of people in Tonopah who still rely on the newspaper.
Joe Westerland is the child of some of my parents' friends. When he delivered the papers, my parents said he had red hair. I don't remember him having red hair. I do remember him coaching basketball and that his daughter was 2 years ahead of me in school. He's now the town manager. In the future, I wonder what Tonopah will be like, and if there's any solutions to the problems that are not special to Tonopah, but happening throughout Nevada. I asked some of my interviewees what solutions they thought might be helpful. Joe Westerland had said maybe having an out-of-town reporter attend virtual town board meetings, or having a citizen contact to let them know when something was happening in town. Arnold Knightley, who was the editor of the Tonopah Times after the previous owner retired and is now the communications manager for Nye County, suggested maybe a nonprofit conglomerate between the small towns. But questions remain on how we could fund a team of journalists. Could out-of-town coverage suffice? Or are we simply looking at a loss of something that used to be vital right before our eyes? Joe Westerland talked about the loss of community, but there's also no one watching local government. In general, statistics show when people don't have information on the town, there's less voting and civic engagement, greater polarization, and more government waste.
When's the last time, who's in charge? George Westerland or Don Kaminsky got a phone call from a reporter? I have no idea. I don't really know. Where's that non-biased, non-partisan voice in the community to look at subjects and say why this is good or bad, or what's really going on here, or, ask the question. There used to be so many newspapers in this whole region, and that's how you know the story and the history and who the people were, and and opinions and what people thought of things and letters to editors and all those kind of things. I mean, is that what communities like this or Austin or Ely or whatever are, or Mesquite or Pinoche? Are they just places that people parachute into when there's like a storm area 51 thing, and and then they leave, and I don't know if that's good. Well, I know it's not good. Because when I was a reporter, I like to tell people's stories, and my friend John L. Smith, when he was at the Review Journal, he did like a lot of rural Nevada columns, you know, and I don't know if there's anybody out there doing that, you know, who understand the history, you know. I don't know. I mean, do people who show up for Jim Butler even know who Jim Butler was and why it matters? I don't know. I don't know what's being missed. That's the question. You never know what's being missed because there's nobody there. And it's not criticism of the town. It's just, you know, you don't know the stories that aren't being told because there's nobody here to tell them, you know.
While Tonopah's coverage isn't complete, it does have more than some rural towns. As Arnold Knightley brought up, what is being missed? What are we losing? What can we do about it? In the future, will we see the records of our past, or will it crumble away with every passing winter? I wish I had more answers. I think of the decline of newspapers and the rise of the internet as a sign of change, that our communication is transforming. But what we need to strive for is not to leave people out of this discussion. As a largely rural state, we can't leave the rurals without journalism. We must move to the next era of journalism together.